you'd be surprised how many things you can make a mistake when you don't have a good checklist. And a lot less will go wrong if you listen to this episode, take good note, and have a checklist similar to what I'm about to share.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam A. Adams. And funny story is that this last week, I was playing with different microphones. I switched from a different mic to the mic that I'm using now, and I didn't check everything. And I ended up recording a couple of episodes that sounded pretty bad. One of them was a solo episode and the other is an interview episode. And so, unfortunately, I'm going to go back and re-record the solo episode another time. It took me like more than a half an hour the first time. And, you know, time is valuable. Time is money. Time is our most valuable asset. You've heard all of that. And I wasted it. I wasted it by preparing, getting in the right headspace, and then pressing record. But I mistakenly didn't have the microphone hooked up to where it needed to be hooked up. And if you don't have the microphone hooked up to the right mic, then it'll sound crappy. And for a solo episode that's about a half an hour, I don't want to put you through that. I don't want to put you through having to listen to that. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And so I'm actually going to go and I'm going to re-record that episode and record it again. So my teammate, luckily, Jen, reached out to me and she says, hey, you know, the audio quality doesn't sound normal. I'm not sure what's going on. And she sent me these two recordings, the one that's a solo and the one with an interview. And I listened to it and I'm like, shit, man, I'm using my webcam mic. So it's because I turned my Rodecaster off. That disconnected my microphone. And then when I came back, I didn't double check. I did double check in the beginning of this episode before I started recording this one. Of course, I went in and I was like, I need to do this. And it brings me back to when I was a newer podcaster, I was better at using a checklist. I had a checklist of 6 different things. Today, I'm going to talk about 10 ideas and you can take them or leave them. I'm going to give you like 10 ideas that will go on a checklist that will help you. But when I first started, I kept on recording. I kept on thinking that I was recording an episode, but I never pressed the record button. So I'd sit there for all of that time and energy, but I never even pressed record. Another bad thing is to actually record the episode, but not be using the right mic. And so your sound quality sounds really bad and it's hard to understand you. It's hard to hear you. And the echo and the reverb kind of gets in the way of the content for your listener. And so I had a checklist and a couple of the things were make sure that you press record. Make sure that you're using the right microphone. So double check the microphone every single time before you record. And it reminds me of a story that a buddy of mine told me. It's about an airplane and how he literally almost died. I'll share that in a second. Before I share that with you, maybe I'll go over these 10 things that you could use as part of your own checklist. The 10 things that I've got written down here are A, make sure that you get enough sleep. It kind of sucks to go into a recording when you don't get enough sleep. So potentially you could even have as part of your checklist, make sure I go to bed at 9 p.m. the night before or 10 p.m. or whatever works for you. Make sure that I sleep in until 7 a.m. on this day because I really got to be functioning well and sleep is an important part of that. Another thing that you may add to your checklist, the second thing that you might want on your checklist is food. Now, some people say that you are a lot more groggy. It's harder for you to think clearly. Some people, and I would say, venture to say more of the doctors and neuroscientists are going to agree with this. They say if you eat within 2 to 3 hours of recording, your brain function is just not going to be as good because kind of like the digestion, the energy that is taken to digest all that food, it takes some resources from the rest of your body, your mind, and you are likely to have a worse recording if you eat right before, especially if it's a big meal. And so the thought is, for you, is that right or is that wrong? If you don't eat, are you stressed? Are you going to be more distracted because your stomach is growling? Or are you going to have more energy? It's possible you might have more energy by eating, but most of the science would point to don't eat within 3 hours. So you might say if you're going to have a lunch break and you're going to go out to a restaurant and have a big meal, like let's just say noon, you probably wouldn't want to have 2 p.m. appointment for a podcast if you knew that you were going to be eating or drinking alcohol or something like that. So just make this as a consideration. Am I in a fasted state or am I in a fed state? Whichever one works best for you. Again, I'll repeat that on number 2 about food, that the science would normally point to that you shouldn't eat within 3 meals of a time that you have to be eloquent, have a time to be able to think sharply, ask good questions to your guests, or put out really good content. You just need to consider if food or the lack of food should be part of your checklist. The third idea that I've got for you as part of this checklist that you may or may not use is pre-prep. It's what is the pre-prep that I've done or am doing or the research. And so, for example, I'll just be completely honest with you. I don't really do a lot of pre-prep. I might be a bad example of this, but I don't mind winging it either. I don't mind jumping in. And I think we can always have a great product for our listener by the way that we go into something. So pre-prep on a solo episode would be do all of your research ahead of time, and pre-prep on an interview episode. Like, for example, you read that guy's book, or you read that you go to her blog, or you see what her company is, or you check out what stages he's been on, or you listen to her podcast prior to the recording, or you read her blog, or whatever it is. You do some research on that person. You find them on LinkedIn. You see what they're posting about. You get to know them. You get to know their book. You get to know their podcast. And that can arm you with other additional questions. Now, for me, I'm more than happy, at least on my podcast, the podcast on podcasting. I know that I can ask questions that is going to benefit my listener, regardless if I do that or not. I'm going to save my time, and that's not going to be on my checklist. Might actually need to be on yours. So again, the third thing is your pre-prep, which is research, doing your due diligence on the person that you're interviewing. The fourth thing that I have written down that is a huge possibility for you is your wardrobe and makeup. So for example, I don't wear makeup. I can't say that I never have. There was a Halloween that I had a little bit of fun. I'll say that much, but typically saying that's not for me. I don't really have any makeup that I need to wear. It might be because I'm a guy, or it might be because who knows, but that's just not something I have to focus on. So the makeup isn't going to be part of mine. But maybe, shaving my beard, maybe giving my beard a trim, or doing my hair, or putting on a hat, maybe making sure that I have a collared shirt on, or a button-up shirt, or maybe just making sure I have a shirt at all. Because sometimes I record sleeveless. I'll get home from the gym. I'll have some energy. I would have had an idea that came to me while I was doing some curls or some push-ups or something. And then I'll have an idea and I'll just run home and I'll get excited about it, jump right on the computer and start recording. But again, the fourth thing is consider your wardrobe or your makeup. Am I looking the part that I want to look? Am I showing up the way that I want to show up for my person? And that also goes to your solo episodes, especially if you're recording. Listen carefully, because I've got some ideas here on the wardrobe and makeup. On your solo episodes, there's a couple reasons why you might want to do this. Number one is if you're recording video, then of course you're going to want to look good on camera. But here's the secondary thing that most people don't think about is if your hair's messed up, or even if you forget to brush your teeth and you got rank breath, honestly will distract you, honestly will take some of your confidence away. In some cases, if you're not wearing a suit jacket or even a collared shirt or something, for some people, that action, that omission of not putting on a certain thing or having the makeup done or having your hair done, or having deodorant on or brushing your teeth or something like that, it will distract you so much that you'll put out bad content. You will not be able to put out good content. And so it gets into our mentality, it gets into our psychology, and actually has us put out worse product than we could if we were to dress sharp. So even just doing a solo episode, regardless if we're recording it for the video to be shown at all, it may be in your best interest to look the part. The thoughts in your mind when you are looking sharp and feeling like you did something, like even just making your bed that day. Hey, I'm going to make my bed. Now I feel better. Now I can go and do the rest, because how you keep your house is how you do everything. That's what they say. So just make it a consideration. Should I add what my wardrobe or hair or makeup or making my bed is going to be? Should I be trimming my beard, whether I'm using video on or whether I'm having the video off? Make that consideration. Should I put this on my checklist? The fifth thing that you may want to have on your checklist is, am I standing up? I used to have a standing desk and I had a sitting desk, and I started recording all of my episodes sitting down. And then I found out that it will work better. You will have a better energy if you stand up. And so I would try to remember to go over to my other computer because I didn't have a convertible desk. My desk wasn't able to convert from standing to sitting. I had two different desks. I had a sitting one with 3 monitors and a standing one with 2 monitors. I did most of my work on my sitting desk with my 3 monitors. But when I wanted to put out a good product, I would go over to my other desk and I would stand up. And by standing up, I would have a better energy. I would approach it a little bit easier. And actually, when you're sitting down, you kind of close off your diaphragm. And so it's harder for you to breathe. It's harder for you to catch your breath. And in some cases, you sound like you don't want to be there. So for me, I would try to remember, I'm going to get out of this desk and I'm going to go to the other desk. Or for others, you have to remember, hey, I've been sitting down, but for recording, I want to be standing up. And so you might convert your desk. Either way, I'm not saying you absolutely have to stand up for your recordings, but it is a good idea to stand up for your recordings. You will actually have better energy and you'll sound better. And it'll just sound like you are more clear and ready. I believe that I think better on my feet. I know that sounds interesting, excuse the pun, but I really believe that I think better when I'm on my feet. When I'm sitting down, I am more sluggish. I am more tired. I am more relaxed. When I'm standing up, it gives me that little bit of energy. And when I had the 2 different desks, I actually just closed down that office. Now I just have a home office. When I had that office, sometimes I would start recording sitting down and I'd be like, I actually can tell that I'm not getting as good of a recording right now because I'm doing it seated. And so I had to remember to stand, to either convert my desk or to get up and go to the other desk or whatever it took to actually be standing, because I would prefer that. And so if that's you, you might want to add that. Hey, make sure I'm standing up. You write down your own checklist. And you go down the list. Sleep. Yep. I got plenty of sleep. Food. Yep. I remembered to fast. Meal prep. No, not meal prep. Pre-prep. Research. Yep. I know about this person that I'm going to be interviewing. I have some ideas what I'm going to ask her. And so I'm ready to go. Makeup, wardrobe. All right. Am I wearing clothes that I feel comfortable in, that make me feel energized, that make me feel proud of myself or confident about myself? And same thing with your breath and maybe even your stinky pit in some cases, right? Think about those things. And then the 5th one is standing up. The 6th one is a mic check. This is the one that I keep freaking messing up. And remember for a second, I've got a story about a checklist about my friend literally almost died. Like he was really, really close to dying because he didn't follow the checklist. And so I will share that, but I want to get through these 10 things and we're going to take a quick break and then I'll share the story about my friend who literally almost died, like not figuratively, actually was so freaking lucky that he's alive right now. All right. So number 6 was a mic check. What that means, I use Zoom. And so what I do to test my mic is that I go into the Zoom settings at the time that I'm starting it and I check my microphone. I push test mic and then it'll play it back to me and I'll make sure that the sound quality is what I'm looking for, that it's using the expensive mic that I spent the money on. Then why am I not using it rather than using my webcam like I did recently? We're going to get into that. So number 6 was a mic check. So you do a mic check. You make sure that you're using the right mic. Number 7 is you do a pre-interview. These 10 things that I'm giving you, they don't have to be your exact checklist, but this is a framework of how to build your checklist. The 7th thing is to do a pre-interview. Now, I don't have this written down on a checklist of mine. Even back in the day, I didn't have it written down. It was so natural to me, I didn't have to write it down. You might want to. The thing that I would do and always do is before I start recording, I naturally do this. I say, this is who my avatar is. This is who my listener is. Tell me what you would like to pour into them. If you only left this podcast today with me and you only said one thing to that person, what would it be? And so that has always become part of my natural way to go. Before I start recording, I do. That brings me to an extra thing that maybe you should add to your checklist, because I've made this mistake before as well. So I'm going to actually give you 11 things. That's funny. I just came up with another one that I've made the mistake. And so I'm typing it down to make sure that I share it with you. I've made this mistake before. And it is that I jump into the recording. I might just be meeting the first person for the first time, or I might know their first name, but not their last. And that maybe they have a complicated first name or spelled super weird, or from a country that you're not familiar with, like a culture that is new to you, where they have silent letters where you would normally want to use that. Like French language and English language are very different. There's a lot of silent letters in English that are completely different than the silent letters in French. And you get all of these new things like X's do a certain thing in the Spanish language, X's do a certain thing in the French language, X's do a certain thing in the English language. And in some cases, they can be pronounced in different ways, or the vowels might be a soft vowel or a hard vowel. There's a number of things. And so what I continue to do is I'll actually done this so many times with the person's name, where I do all of the other things. And then I jump in. I'm like, welcome back to this podcast, whatever your podcast name is. Welcome back to the podcast. It's your host, John Smith. And today I'm joined with Shit. How do you pronounce your name? Okay, let's start over. So there's an option. So you should just do it in the beginning as a part of your checklist. Like you should just make sure and verify that you are pronouncing somebody's name the way that they want you to pronounce it, saying maybe they go by a nickname, maybe they go by John or Jonathan, Mel or Melanie, whatever. Maybe they go by something else. So how do you want to be addressed? How do you pronounce your name? Okay, cool. And now you're in. Now you're ready. Something that I hear people do is I just mentioned, I'm like, hey, this is whatever podcast. Today I'm joined with Shit. What's your name? I've recorded a couple of times where I've been in that position where I'm like, crap, man, I actually don't know how to pronounce your name. And then they correct me while I'm recording, and I published it that way. And I don't agree with that at all. I feel like that's the wrong thing to do. I don't think I should have done that. And I don't think you should do that. If you don't know how to pronounce somebody's name, you should get that cleaned up in the pre-interview time prior to ever actually recording. So you might ask them in the pre-interview, you might double check, hey, how do you pronounce your name, or what name do you want to go by? You might ask, what do you want to pour into my perfect listener? This is what they're going through. This is what they're worried about. What are you passionate about? And those are some good things. So I'm going to say that number 7 is the pre-interview, where you try to figure out all of those details. I'm going to say number 11 is making sure you're pronouncing the name right. Then go back into number 8, the avatar. Who is your avatar? Here's the thing that I've noticed this happens so many times. Somebody's going to record an episode and they will not have their perfect listener in mind. They'll have a general idea of who might be listening, sure. And they might even think that they have multiple avatars, and so they're doing whatever. Or they might think that they're talking to a whole stage. Yeah, sure. Granted, it's true that I think I've got 6,000-ish people listening to every episode. Okay. That's great. I love that. And so in a way, I'm on a very large stage right now. I'm on a massive stage. I mean, this isn't some 100-person conference. This isn't some 500 people conference. This is thousands of people that are probably listening to me all at the same time. And if I think about that being that many people, then I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to have a tough time putting out good content if I'm thinking about a whole giant audience. It's going to make me feel awkward, and I'm not going to be able to really connect with anybody. But instead, I just think of the one person, like my real perfect avatar. And in some case, 2 people. I've got my main avatar and I have a secondary avatar. I've said this before on the podcast. My main avatar is somebody who's been doing it for a while, and they've made some mistakes along the way, and they just need some corrections. They need a little bit of coaching, mentorship. They need to offload some of the work so they don't have to do as much. And maybe they've made some mistakes and we can help them with it. That's my main avatar. And there's a secondary avatar, which is somebody who hasn't yet launched. So avatar number 1, I've been doing this for 2 years or less. Avatar number 2 for me is I want to start. I don't really know where to start, but I want to start. And so when I do my content, I imagine like I'm talking to my main avatar, but my secondary avatar is just sitting in the room with us. And so I'll have a conversation with the main person that I'm trying to serve. And I will be reminded at some points that, hey, there's another person sitting right next to my main avatar that might not be as far along. They may have not been doing this as long as my top avatar, my first avatar, the main person that I serve. And so what do I got to do to make sure that I'm keeping it basic enough, like understandable? Because if you're talking over people's heads, they're going to turn you off. If I say a whole bunch of like phrases that only podcasters podcasters know, the acronyms that are unique, then the new person who hasn't even started this, they're going to be left behind. Not only are they going to be left behind, but they're going to leave me behind. They're going to say to themselves, this podcast isn't really for me. This is for somebody who knows a lot more than me. So I got to stop listening. It naturally happened. So I've got to have my main avatar is I'm visualizing them in the room, having a real actual one-on-one conversation, but a secondary avatar, maybe their friend is sitting right next to them, somebody who's not quite as far along. And that way I can make sure everybody's on the same page and I'm truly serving the people in my podcast that I serve through my business. That really helps me. So you want to consider your avatar. You want to think about your avatar. You might even have a picture of the avatar on your screen. Number 8 being the avatar. It's an idea, a great idea for you to add to your checklist when you're podcasting is, do I know who that is? Do I understand it? Does it feel like I'm talking to that person, having a natural conversation with somebody? Or am I preaching to a whole bunch of people? If you are doing a good job, you're probably speaking to one real avatar, somebody that's really there, and maybe even having a secondary one that you can visualize in the room with you as well. Number 9 is the energy level. And actually, I do that before I start any podcast is I take a breath and I ground myself. I consider, I make thoughts. I think about my avatar. Yeah. I think about if I'm standing, but I also kind of stretch, take a deep breath, and I get in the headspace or the mind space of delivering at the right energy level. And I want to have an energy level of somewhere like 6 or a 7. I want to be slightly above the average person. And so where I'm joyful, I'm supportive, I'm helpful, I'm passionate about what it is that I'm speaking on. And so I clear my mind and I get in that headspace with a nice deep breath. And that's number 9, energy, coming to your podcast with the right energy. Number 10, you want to make sure you freaking press record. Super important. And then number 11, again, was making sure you know how to pronounce the person's name. And that might go with all your pre-prep and your research, but it also might happen because you can't actually always find that. So it might happen when you're on the pre-interview and you just say, hey, how do I pronounce your name or what do you want me to address you by? And actually, I remember there was a person who would not let me call them by just their first name. Their first name was one of those names that you could easily shorten it and have like a nickname. Their middle name was, to me, irrelevant. And their last name, why would I say that? But they asked me every single time I said their name, instead of saying like Tom, this isn't the real person's name, but let's just say that it was a guy and he said, my name is Thomas Jonathan Anderson. Thomas Jonathan Anderson. And I want you to call me Thomas Jonathan Anderson. So you jump on and every time you're like, here I am with Thomas Jonathan Anderson and blah, 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 blah. And just like he wanted to be called that, or she wanted to be called the same, all 3 or all 4 of his names, or all 3 or all 4 of her names, and even never doing a nickname like Tom. It's always Thomas Jonathan Anderson. Anyway, I learned that. I learned that by asking them what they wanted to be called. So I've got a story about my buddy who, he was an airline. He was learning how to be a pilot. He achieved a certain level in his business. And sometimes when you achieve a certain level in business, you want to achieve a certain level in other ways. For me, it was, I got to where my business was at a place that I appreciated it. I liked it. I didn't have to work all that much. And then I started really focusing on my health and my family relationships. And so I spent less time in my business, more time with my physical health, my nutrition, and of course, the relationships with my loved ones, with the sweetheart that I had at the time, really making sure that we had date night once a week and all of that, making sure that I sat down with my kids and gave them the time of day. If they wanted to talk to me about their day, that I really spent that time. And so that was my way of going to the next level. My buddy, Sean, his way of going to his next level was becoming an airline pilot. So he could work for a company, but just so he could say he had his pilot license. I'm about to share that story about how he almost died by not using a checklist. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. let's get back into the show. We are back. We're talking about checklists, and checklists can be super important. They could cost you your life. No joke. In podcasting, hopefully they're not going to cost you your life. We already went through the checklist, some ideas, 11 things. First, I thought it was 10, but then I came up with another one. Some ideas that could be on your checklist. Did I get enough sleep? Did I eat what I wanted to or avoid eating? Pre-prep, doing my research, wardrobe, makeup, shaving, hair, whatever. Standing up, using the right correct microphone, doing a pre-interview, making sure that person is thinking about how to add value, understanding my avatar or my primary and secondary avatar. Coming in with the right energy was number 9. Making sure you freaking press the record button was the 10th one that I suggested. And then number 11 was making sure you're pronouncing their name right. Now, I got this buddy named Sean. Sean is actually a coach that I've been paying since, I think, 2018. So it's been several years that I've been paying him. I think it's like $1,500 a month is what he charges. So I've been working with him for a few years. And I went to one of his events and he told us about how important a checklist is when you're speaking on stage. Like, make sure that you have this, make sure you have this, make sure I've got my talk, my cue cards, my notes. Make sure I've got my music, make sure that I'm pumped up, I've got right energy, I'm wearing the right thing. He's talked about like, make sure that I talk about this or talk about that. We need to add a checklist for this. And then he mentioned, I feel like I've said talk about so many times. I'm actually laughing at myself. Anyway, Sean started to learn how to fly planes. And his instructor told him how important it was to have a checklist. And it's so important that they actually strap the checklist to your leg. And I think that that might be the case for all people learning. But if it's not, it's at least the case when Sean was learning from this instructor. And they basically strap this checklist to their leg, like where their knee is, on their thigh. And so it's always going to be there. And they'll go through it. It'll say, turn on the engine. It'll say, check this. It'll say, make sure you have enough gas, because wouldn't it suck to be up in the air and not have gas? Because all of a sudden you don't have fuel. Maybe they don't call it gas. It's not gasoline. It is jet fuel. But anyway, wouldn't it be bad to not have put the fuel on? Wouldn't it be bad to have it where your safety equipment wasn't there? So they've got this checklist to make sure all of that. Do this, do this. And one day his instructor said, hey man, you are ready. You're ready to be on your own. And Sean was freaking out. He's like, are you kidding me? Like, I haven't done this enough. I need you there with me. And so he goes, nope, you're going to do a bunch of what's called touch and goes. So you're going to fly up. And you're going to go around, you're going to circle the block, and then you're going to touch down, and then you're going to take off again, circle the block, touch down, take off, and do that a number of times. And it was a very, very, very hot day. And airplanes, at least his airplane, it was hot inside. I mean, it's like a freaking piece of metal that is cooking you. And it was middle of summer, and he did these touch and goes a few times. And he did it successfully. And he thought to himself, I guess I don't need this checklist. He was sweaty because it was so hot. That's why I brought that part up. It's in the middle of summer. And it's strapped to his leg. So he takes it off and he puts it to the seat next to him. And now he's not going through his checklist anymore. Now he's recording his podcast without his 10 or 11 things, without his 6 things. And he goes up, and the short of the story is he didn't do something. And he came down for a landing, and it was so bad that he nosedived. He came down, he didn't do a certain thing. And so what it did is it made the front end, he said he was facing straight down. He said he was facing straight down to the runway, to the street, and he thought he was going to flip over. He thought for sure he was going to die. It was the scariest time. I think he might have said he pooped or peed himself. And what ended up happening is he neglected one thing that should be normal, that he thinks he knows by heart. Ends up happening is it almost cost him his life. He was scared literally to death. No, he was scared that he would die. The fright didn't kill him. And so this is what happened to him. And you know what happened to me recently, as I mentioned before, is I was using the wrong mic. So here's the end of today's podcast is I'm going to have to re-record a solo. I have Jen from my team. She's sending me the transcript of what I recorded before. So I can look at the transcript, I can tweak a couple of things, and I can sit down, double check that I'm using the right mic and recording using my checklist. and I have to re-record that. But I also recorded an episode with a gentleman, Rashawn, which actually is the next episode after this. Rashawn's podcast episode is coming out in a couple of days from now. So you'll hear that, and you'll hear how bad my audio quality is because I used the wrong mic. I just don't want to have to reach out to him and tell him, hey, I'm sorry, like I made a mistake. We've got to re-record. And so unfortunately, I've got to tell my listener, my audience that, hey, I messed up. I effed up. And as a result, you've got an episode where it's recorded in an audio quality that is not normal for me. You're going to hear this and I don't want you to be turned off. So I'm kind of giving that pre-warning now that the next episode is like that. And I'm also having to record a short recording that I'm going to give to Jen, basically just going to say, hey, this episode, I forgot my checklist and I almost died. And so I recorded bad audio. And listen, here's a moral of the story. Here's a takeaway that you could have. How many episodes has Adam Adams done? Probably close to 900 episodes, probably more than 900 episodes. That's a shit ton of episodes. That's a lot of content. That's a lot of time sitting in front of my computer. And even I made the mistake, just like my buddy, Sean, he took off and he landed. He took off and he landed. He touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. He takes the checklist off of his leg. He thinks he got everything, but he doesn't. It almost kills him. And that was my mistake as well. I got too cocky. I got too confident. I got to a place where I was like, nah, I've done over 800, 900 episodes now, almost 1,000 episodes. So I got my shit together. I know what I'm doing here. And ended up recording a way that I didn't want. Now, it's not going to cost me my life, but it is frustrating because time is money. Time is valuable. And I'm going to have to re-record an episode that I already spent time on. And I'm going to also have to put out a piece of content that's with Rashawn, the next episode after this, that doesn't sound good, that you're not going to be impressed with. And I got to deal with that. And I guess now you've got to deal with that too. And so make sure that you do have a checklist, have those 11 things that I mentioned as a potential, what you could add to your checklist, and feel free to add more. Feel free to add other things that you need to do. Maybe you need to wear headphones. Maybe you need to tell your kids to be quiet. So on the next episode, I'm going to be with Rashawn. Luckily, he talks more than I do on that. So for the most part, for more than half of it, you're going to get great audio quality. But for the other half, you're going to have to deal with that. And I feel bad. I'm still going to publish it. Just remember, stay tuned for that other episode. It's the very next episode. Hopefully you got a lot of learning in today. I guess 13 or 14 options that I put on your potential checklist. And I'll see you on the episode with Rashawn. You're not alone if you're ready to either get your very first affordable microphone or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to some legit podcasting studio equipment. Because on all of the forums over the last few months, I'm seeing this all the time. Even my own personal clients that work with my team, they're ready to get that next microphone. They're asking us for it. Additionally, when I'm on discovery calls with potential clients, they're always asking for this stuff. Hey, what mic do you recommend? Hey, what lighting do you recommend? What webcam should I be using? So many questions. And so what we did, my whole team has put together a PDF so that if you're one of those people who is looking to either get your very first affordable microphone, or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to more professional podcast studio equipment, whether it's soundproofing or whatever, we've got you covered by going to growyourshow.com/PDF. And you can download the PDF for free, or right there on the webpage is everything that you would have and you don't need to download the PDF. Either way, just go to growyourshow.com/PDF, which will put you to the podcasting equipment that me and my team have personally vetted. I'll see you on the next episode.